Welcome back, viewers. I'd like to now introduce the next panel by Every Canadian Counts as they discuss how to advance economic and social inclusion for those with lifelong disabilities in Canada. The panel today is moderated by Deirdre Guy and Hubert Van Niekerk, alongside with James Van Schaik, Ryan Yellowlees, and Bruce Bonyhady. Over to you, Deirdre.
All right. I think, unfortunately, can you hear me all right?
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Deidre called me a little bit earlier and could hardly talk. So I'm going to work our way through this and be the moderator and also introduce the next panel or the next guest. So please bear with me. I don't know how to do split screen, so I won't be seeing the pictures as I read these things off. So bear with us. So a very big welcome. So Every Canadian Counts is a national Canadian not-for-profit organization led by volunteers with and without disabilities. We have 8 board members and 3 advisory board members, as well as a steering committee that meets regularly. Founded over a decade ago, our commitment is to provide Canadians with a solution to the growing need to support for all Canadians with disabilities. A national disability insurance plan would ensure that Canadians with significant lifelong disabilities receive the care and assistance they need from birth to end of life or an acquired disability later in life. So I'll go through the bios of each of the panelists today. So first off is Deidre, who's not here. She's the moderator and she's also a board member. She has lived experience with disabilities and spent many years working in support of accessibility and disability inclusion. Part of her motivation is the desire to make real change in the lives of disabled Canadians. She was also one of the founders of the IWSCC, and please do not ask me to explain what that is, but I can explain what it is, just not the acronym. Deidre worked very hard in working with persons with disabilities, a lot of veterans who would have their own business for procurement into large businesses. So made the connection between those individuals. And she would introduce myself. I have a long history of special education, and I'm Hubert Van Niekerk. I'm the executive director. So a long history of special education and community leader and volunteer in the disabled community. In addition to leading Every Canadian Counts as executive director, I've been involved with the Ontario Association for Development Education over 20 years. I'm also on the board of L'Arche London and as a director and engaged actually for a year a teacher exchange in Australia. So Ryan Yellowlees is a board member. He's a registered clinical counselor who supports individuals with chronic illnesses and disability using a disability justice perspective. He has turned great adversity into great victory. His story gives hope that you can have a great life worth living. And Ryan will at first put he has recorded his session, but he is online and is looking forward to questions. And Bruce Bonyhady, he's on our advisory board. And Bruce Bonyhady is the executive chair and director of Melbourne Institute in the University of Melbourne, Australia, and one of the key architects of the National Disability Insurance Scheme for Australia, the template that we are following, only doing it better. He is widely regarded as the father of the NDIS and is currently working to implement needed changes brought forward from a major review a year ago. James Van Schaik is our human rights specialist. He joined us some time ago now, and he has an honors degree in human rights, social and political thought, and political science. Currently a PhD and candidate for the at the University of Waterloo, MA, Theory and Criticism. His goal is to continue with the betterment of human rights within Canada and the world. So then Deidre is going to introduce me as the ferocious leader. I'll try not to bite anybody. So thank you again for everyone to joining us for this session. By the end of this session, we hope that you will see how a national disability insurance plan would alleviate so many of the issues that people with disabilities face and not just those with disabilities, but their families that support them at great cost, both financially and emotionally. We will never get rid of poverty and disability unless we get rid of the cost of disability first, or at least alongside. Poverty costs and disability costs need to be kept as two separate line items. They really are two separate things, often cousins, but they need to be kept separate because you don't get rid of one without the other. It is our belief that every Canadian with a disability deserves the right to live healthy, safe, and secure lives as participating members of society through equitable access to the broadest range of societal supports and opportunities. Australia has led the way with their NDIS, National Disability Insurance Scheme. We can take the lessons learned there, but also other countries of what is working well in our country and build a truly made in Canada plan that would be world renowned. The disability is not the disabled person's fault. So why should you as a person with a disability or your family need to carry the cost of that disability? That should be a society cost that can be accomplished through a federal insurance model of support. Why should the parent, usually the mom, need to quit their career to become non-paid caregivers and not only lose their income, but also lose their ability to pay into a work pension or Canada pension plan? This loss of income often results in poverty from financial ruin, family breakdown, isolation, family services involvement, and no pension at retirement, and they become part of the welfare state that can lead to homelessness, drug addiction, and worse. Currently, we have alliances. Currently, what we're doing is we are working with the university, Western University, with community engaged learning programs. We're working with 3 university groups to further complement our push for a national disability insurance plan. We have 2 groups of political science students and 1 group of health sciences students. So that kind of brings us where we are politically. In the past, our agenda has been pushed aside, I believe, because there was a focus in disability support went to Accessibility Canada Act, the Disability Inclusion Action Plan, and the resulting Canada Disability Benefit, which we all know leaves a lot to be desired. The time is now to have government focus on a national disability insurance plan. We are in conversation with several members of Parliament and are making progress in that area. We truly are. We feel that this plan needs to be nonpartisan and accepted by the people of Canada at a grassroots level. Individual provinces and territories are all over the map, literally and metaphorically, when it comes to disabled support. So much waste and duplication, and agencies set up with none of them meeting their objective. As shown by research completed by Kids Brain Health, the major study that they did looked at all these services available both federally and provincially, and none of them are meeting their mandate. This screams for one centralized plan, a plan where you receive support based on your actual functional disability need, not means tested, and it would be portable across the country. Why should you be stuck in Ontario? That takes us to what could and should be the alternative. We believe a publicly funded national disability insurance plan for all those with lifelong disabilities from birth to end of life should be enacted. So here's a list of services, and I'll keep it short. I'll try to cut this off a little bit. That could be under a national disability insurance plan. So first would be health and medical supports. So you'd have access to assistive technologies, devices such as mobility aids, hearing aids, vision supports, communication devices. There'd be coverage for therapies, not universally insured, like physiotherapy, occupational therapy, speech, behavior. There'd be personalized rehabilitation and habilitation programs tailored to long-term conditions, specialized clinics and coordinated care networks for complex and rare disabilities, expanded mental health services. In the area of personal support and caregiving, there'd be paid caregiving available nationwide, reducing reliance on unpaid family caregiving. Direct funding models would allow individuals to hire and manage their own care staff. Support for aging as a result of lifelong disability. For income and unemployment, there'd be wage subsidies and workplace accommodation to encourage employers, vocational training, entrepreneurial support, retirement security measures to look after what happens after when you get old. There'd be education and skill development in post-secondary for all the help you would need to move ahead. housing and independent living. We know what that is. Transportation and mobility. There's such a lack in transportation for persons with disabilities. That would be and should be corrected. Community and social participation, so that people can actually do the things they would like to do. And family caregiver support, financial compensation for family caregivers who leave the workforce, counseling and peer support network for families, training programs for caregivers to build skills in safe and effective support, future planning supports, linked guardianship, wills, trusts, housing, equity, inclusion measures. In short, a national disability insurance plan would replace fragmented provincial and territorial supports with coherent, portable, and equitable system, ensuring people with significant disabilities have the tools, services, and financial security to live with dignity and independence. With these types of supports, the savings in healthcare, emergency services, policing, incarceration, homelessness, mental illness, early intervention before more disabilities occur, etc., without many more additional costs. It's an economic driver. Just having a healthier population brings benefit, but regardless of cost, it's simply the right thing to do. So please do post your questions in the chat. Now, if the tech people could announce, we have a recording from Bruce Bonahady, and please put that up.
Hello, my name is Professor Bruce Bonahady, and I'm delighted and honoured to be recording this video in support of Every Canadian Counts and its resolute campaign for a national disability insurance plan based on Australia's National Disability Insurance Scheme, or NDIS. The NDIS was introduced in Australia in 2013. It's a world first, which has transformed the lives of people with disability, their families and carers. It has changed Australia for the better, making our society much more inclusive and much fairer. Today, I'm speaking to you from the University of Melbourne, where I am the director of the Melbourne Disability Institute, an interdisciplinary research institute committed to improving the lives of people with disability, their families and carers in Australia and globally. I've in fact been working with Every Canadian Counts for about 10 years because I deeply admire their vision and their determination. My previous roles include being the inaugural chair of the National Disability Insurance Agency, which is responsible for the NDIS, and in 2022 and 2023, I co-chaired a review of the NDIS. I'm widely regarded as one of the key architects of the NDIS. The origins of the NDIS can be found largely in the actions of people with disability, their carers, families and service providers. They came together, uniting behind the idea of the NDIS because they could see it was going to provide support based on need and give certainty to people with disability and their families. They won the support of the Australian community and governments through the Every Australian Counts campaign. We prove that from very small and humble beginnings, unity can drive big and significant changes that change society for the better. The Every Australian Counts campaign was helped by 4 very influential government reports in the years 2009 to 2011. In 2009, the Disability Investment Group recommended an NDIS for the first time. They argued that government should stop thinking about disability as purely a cost and invest in people with disability to provide benefits to them and the wider society. Also in 2009, people with disability and carers came together and wrote the Shutout Report. This report documented that while the large institutions in which Australians with disability had lived had largely been closed, They remain shut out of society. In 2010, there was a major review of Australia's social security system, and in particular the pensions, benefits and allowances the government pays. This resulted in significant increases in pensions. But that review also identified that benefits, very similar to the Canadian disability benefit, will never be sufficiently tailored to meet the needs of people with disability, because some of them experience very significant additional costs. And then in 2011, Australia's Productivity Commission found that Australia's then disability support system was, and I quote, underfunded, unfair, fragmented, inefficient, and gives people with disability little choice and no certainty of access to appropriate supports. When I look at Canada, the sharp observations of our Productivity Commission regrettably applied to you and people with disability in Canada today. These challenges would be addressed directly through a national disability insurance plan. The key elements of Australia's NDIS, which could form the basis of an NDIP, and why it is so revolutionary, are as follows. First, the NDIS is available to all people with significant and permanent disabilities, and so includes people with intellectual, physical, sensory and psychosocial disabilities. Functional impairment, rather than medical diagnosis, is the basis of eligibility. Second, it's available to all people with significant and permanent disabilities under 65, irrespective of the cause of the disability. It therefore provides an important safety net for all Australians, because none of us know when we might acquire a disability ourselves, or our children or grandchildren might be born with a disability. People over the age of 65 who acquire disabilities are eligible for support through our aged care system. Third, support under the NDIS is based on need, and so it is fair. The NDIS provides reasonable and necessary benefits and includes supports for activities of daily living, such as showering or helping with dressing, accessing the community, and provides essential equipment, such as wheelchairs. Fourth, the funds go to individuals to purchase the supports they need. Individuals therefore have control and choice, and so the system is efficient because they can choose those supports that best meet their needs. Fifth, the NDIS is based on a social model of disability, and so, for example, it works closely with our health system to ensure the well-being of Australians with disability. And finally, the scheme has generated enormous economic growth, creating many, many jobs, and so helps all Australians. The NDIS is now 12 years old. Inevitably, when you've had a reform as large and complex as the NDIS, there have been teething problems, and now governments are addressing those issues based on the findings of the NDIS review. The legislation underpinning the NDIS has been updated, reflecting lessons we've learned, while maintaining the core objectives. The participant pathways being improved to ensure that the scheme is fair, and the NDIS is being made sustainable so that it will be there for all Australians when and if they need it in the years to come. It's an exciting time for us, and also an opportunity for you, because as you think about a national disability insurance plan, there are real opportunities to learn from our experiences here in Australia with the NDIS. Looking back and looking forward, my major reflections and observations are that with unity, anything is possible. Think big. Get behind Every Canadian Counts and the NDIP, because then, and only then, will Canadians with disability have a fair future out of poverty, with families no longer be fearing what will happen to their son or daughter when they can no longer care for them. Thank you.
All right. As you can see, Australia went through a lot of the same problems that we have today, and it's why we are so passionate about bringing this forward. I'd like to now introduce Ryan Yellowlees, who, like I mentioned earlier, has a pre-recorded message so that he can get all his words in in the allowed time. So please bring in Ryan.
Hi, my name is Ryan Yellowlees. I am a registered clinical counselor, disability activist, and board member of Every Canadian Counts from Victoria, British Columbia. How does a lack of disability supports leads to mental illness? Financial stress of paying for disability and health-related supports not covered by the Canadian government contributes to people developing mental illnesses. Disability poverty leads to helplessness, despair, worsening mental health, and anxiety about food and housing security. This puts people at significantly higher risk of developing serious mental illness like anxiety and depressive disorders. Making difficult decisions between having food or receiving supports not covered by the Canadian government, such as counseling, massage therapy, medical supplies, and some medications, etc. Significant reduced access to mental health care due to physical and financial barriers leads to unmet mental health, which escalates mental health deterioration. Persons with disabilities are at increased risk of experiencing discrimination, medical trauma, creates further barriers to receiving supports and mental health treatments. To make things worse, many mental health professionals refuse to help people with disabilities with their mental health due to discrimination. For example, a clinical counselor refuses to see a disabled client by stating, "I do not specialize in disability," which surprisingly frequently occurs across Canada. How will persons with disabilities be affected when mental illness qualifies for medical assistance in dying in March 2027? If MAID becomes available to people whose sole health condition is a mental illness in March 17, 2027, gaps in disability and chronic illness supports will push many people towards MAID because of ableism, poverty, food insecurity, housing insecurity, and a lack of access to caregiving and medical and mental health treatments. This will drive a significantly large number of persons with disabilities to experience intolerable life circumstances due to unmet needs or poverty to get a mental illness diagnosis for the sole purpose of granting themselves the ability to kill themselves through MAID. As it stands now, mental illness MAID legislation has a lack of safeguards put in place when mental illness will become eligible for MAID. This will make it extremely easy for persons with disabilities who have unmet human needs, a lack of supports or resources, or who have faced significant discrimination to get a mental health diagnosis to end their lives. In the context of these factors, many persons with disabilities will see death as their most attractive option. because Canada has not done its part to ensure them the quality of life they should rightfully be theirs. How does ableism push people into killing themselves with MAID? The Canadian government policies and laws do not value the lives of persons with disabilities and or illnesses by making MAID easy to access but difficult to access resources, basic human needs for persons with disabilities and illnesses to live. Canadian law focuses on access to MAID rather than providing adequate support, resources, and medical care to persons with disabilities and or illnesses. Canada is the only country where people can receive MAID as first-line treatment without first trying other treatments. Canada provides medical assistance in dying instead of medical assistance in living. Practitioners minimize accommodations, symptoms, physical pain, or mental health concerns of people with disabilities and or illnesses, leading to worse health outcomes. To make things more difficult, they encounter ableism, inaccessible clinics. Too often, practitioners imply people with disabilities are less valuable, too hard to fix, or a nuisance, may view disability as a tragedy or hopeless, reinforcing messages that life with disability is not worth living, which further pushes persons with disabilities to get MAID done. Many persons with disabilities are encouraged by health professionals, family, and friends to get MAID done, even though they had not expressed interest in getting MAID done or seeking it as a medical treatment. There has been documented cases in Canada of nurses and doctors encouraging persons with disabilities or illnesses to get medical assistance in dying. In all documented cases, the nurses and doctors received no disciplinary action. MAID legislation views persons with disabilities with sympathy and pity, and helping people with disabilities to assisted death is viewed as merciful. This is an ableist assumption that reinforces Canada's history of neglect and exclusion, which sees states of disability as inferior. MAID is a rebranding of the Canadian eugenics movement. Canada's society views persons with disabilities as a killable class. What is the solution to all of this? The solution is a national disability insurance plan, which would create equity for persons with disabilities by replacing Canada's fragmented, underfunded, and discriminatory disability support system with a universal, rights-based federal disability government program grounded in fairness, dignity, and full participation. The NDIP would ensure that all Canadians with disabilities would receive fair support, income, healthcare, services, and opportunities they need to thrive and fully participate in Canadian society. The NDIP would massively decrease the need to access MAID as a medical treatment. This would ensure that persons with disabilities would have actual assistance in living instead of only assistance in dying.
Thank you, Ryan. I think we all felt that. We talked about human rights and what else can be done. We are certainly looking at other areas, and I think to speak to that is James Van Schaik. He's our human rights, definitely our human rights specialist, and has done a lot of studies in these areas. So, James, go ahead.
Thanks, Hubert. Thanks, Daniel. And thank you guys for listening to our presentation. So basically, my colleagues have highlighted social injustices that people living with disabilities face in Canada today. These social injustices are in fact human rights violations, and that's what I'm here to focus on. So Canada enjoys a robust social security system that basically provides universal health care and income support based on individual needs and circumstances. These supports are mainly in place because living with dignity is a human right in Canada. However, there is no parallel guarantee to access adequate disability-specific care and support services as a matter of right for people living with disabilities in Canada. Ryan and Hubert have covered this. Simply put, a national disability plan is a human right under Canada's commitment to international human rights law. This is set out primarily in the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability. I'm just going to refer to that as the CRPD, and also in other international human rights instruments. So these are basically systemic shortcomings that we've talked about, and they represent Canada's failure to live up to its duty under these laws and agreements. So what they really represent is the failure of disability human rights in Canada. There's the urgent need for a coordinated, equitable, and rights-based national framework that ensures persons with disabilities can access consistent, adequate, and portable supports across the country that the NDIP that ECC is advocating for would bring. Specifically under human rights law, Canada bears clear and binding obligations to respect, protect, and fulfill the rights of persons with disabilities. And they require Canada to take, quote, deliberate, contact, and targeted, unquote, steps towards the full realization of these rights. And that quote there is actually from the CRPD that Canada has ratified and made a commitment to fulfill the duties under that international human rights law. So this requires the realization of these rights. So it's more than just a codified set of rights. It actually requires materialization of these rights through federal programs such as an NDIP. And this requires including the allocation of maximum available resources. So an inadequate plan does not meet the requirements under international law. So this includes a national disability plan. So despite these obligations, Canada has not demonstrated consistent progress towards ensuring adequate support services, community-based care, or equitable living standards for persons with living with disabilities. And the UN has cited them basically since 2006 for continued violations of these rights as part of the Universal Periodic Review of Human Rights in Canada. Specifically, Article 28 of the CRPD obliges Canada to recognize and ensure the right of persons living with disabilities to an adequate standard of living, including adequate food, clothing, housing, and access to continuous improvement in living conditions. But as we have seen in practice, many Canadians with disabilities live below the poverty lines, face severe housing insecurity, and lack access to essential supports that will really just enable them to live independently and with dignity. So these failures amount to de facto discrimination and violations of international human rights law. They're inconsistent with the obligations of non-discrimination and equality of opportunity, which are human rights. And really part of ECC's activism on this front is to bring a challenge to this issue before the UN Human Rights Commission regarding these social injustices. So I want to basically finish with the notion that at the end of the day, legal obligation alone cannot be the sole motivation for upholding these rights. Canada prides itself on being an exclusive, equitable nation that provides social supports for its most vulnerable. To be able to continue to do so, it has to meet these standards for all groups, including people living with disabilities. And a national insurance plan would do that. Thank you.
Thank you, James. So not only the right thing to do, but also the legal thing that we need to do. I really appreciate that. I've been given heck for talking too fast. Hopefully I'll do this within time. So in kind of closing, Canada has an opportunity to do more than patch holes in a broken system support. We can create an entirely new social and economic infrastructure and national disability insurance plan. Right now, disability supports are scattered, underfunded, nightmarish to access, and have a long waiting list that mostly can't be satisfied. A national disability insurance plan would redefine the disability support space by making it a permanent pillar of Canada's nation building, on par with universal health care. With this new model of support, Canada can live up to its duty to Canadians with disabilities and human rights by providing adequate and accessible care and benefits while positioning itself as the global leader in inclusive prosperity by harnessing the talents of millions of Canadians with disabilities, leveling the playing field between urban, rural, remote, and Indigenous populations, freeing families from forced exits from the workforce to become unpaid caregivers, and driving long-term economic returns through higher productivity, long-term career creation, stronger tax revenues, and reduced systemic cost. It is not about tinkering on the margins, as has been the case. It is about creating a bold new system that reframes disability, not as a cost to contain or charity, but as an investment in people that transforms our society and our economy. You insure your home, your car, your pets, including the pet gerbil. Why wouldn't you want an insurance on yourself or loved ones? A separate fund set aside, similar to the Canada Pension Plan or employment insurance, so when you need it, it is there. The causes and effects of disabilities and poverty have now been amply studied, debated, and researched. The only research we need now is the government to do the scan on all of this, and with the help of actual disabled people at the grassroots level, determine if a national disability insurance plan is feasible, viable, and desirable. I foresee that answer to be a resounding yes by all political parties and all Canadians, just as it was in Australia. So now what can you do about the National Disability Insurance Plan? And now that you know about this, it is incumbent upon you to contact your local member of parliament and not ask nicely for a National Disability Insurance Plan, but demand it. So now we'll go on to our question and answer. And that sort of concludes our formal part. I'm looking to see where the questions and answers are.
Actually, Hubert, I can help you here. Yes. First and foremost, I would like to just sincerely thank Hubert, Ryan, and also James for such an informative panel. Learned so much today, and much resonated with me, and I believe with our viewers as well. So just diving into some of the questions, we have two here for the panels. The first question is, in what ways would a national insurance plan ensure equitable access to supports and services for all Canadians? Now, no name assigned, so I'd like to open it to the panel.
Ryan, if you're able, I would like to give you the opportunity. If I have an answer as well, I'm happy to answer that.
Well, I think it's like to make it equitable, but like it's easy to access. It's not going to be like the way it is currently. You have to prove your disability, that it will be based on like investing in people with disabilities. It'd be more like instead of like it'd be like a positive thing. Be access to Canada wide, regardless of any status, race, or anything like that. Like if you're up north in BC or anywhere in Canada, you would be able to access it, which currently in other provinces like Nova Scotia, there is no disability program. So that would fix that issue, make it like easy to access. apply, anybody could apply, and it's like based on function, not on proof of disability.
I couldn't have said that any better. James, anything to add?
Maybe just if you look at it from a social policy perspective, it basically functions just like our healthcare system would function, where, if you if you need healthcare, you don't need to go through a vetting process. It's a universal system that everyone is entitled to as a right. So this would be the same sort of thing, but it's for people with disabilities. Because as right now, what Ryan was talking about too is that that's not the case now. There's a lot of barriers to access the minimal supports that we do have in place.
Yes.
Thank you. Another question that's come in for the panel is we talk about community and how we uplift each other to move to the next stage, to empower those. The question comes as beyond economic supports, how can communities across Canada foster genuine belonging and inclusion for people with lifelong disabilities? Any thoughts?
Well, I guess like this national disability insurance plan would like ensure people could get easier access into the community so they could join other people with disabilities, let their voices be heard. Then I just like think like yeah, because they're able to get out there because they have the accessible van or what they need, and just like they're mattered, they're have the supports to work, they could do an online job, contribute to the economy. Like they're way able to be more active and participate in society, kind of like what I mentioned in my speech earlier.
That's very, very true, Ryan. If people have the support they need, they're just like everybody else. They're not stuck in a corner. They're in public. They're getting the support they need, and the stigma is gone. The ableism hopefully is reduced, and they just have a chance to do everything that everybody else can do. Go to a ball game with friends, go to a movie, have a relationship with a loving relationship that isn't clawed back, or you're held in an abusive situation because the spouse is the breadwinner and you've lost all your ability to collect any disability insurance. So this is just a fair, individual need. It's not based on income, so you don't always have to prove how poor you are. It's an entitlement-based system. It's not your fault again that it's your disability or that you're born with a disability. It's not your parents' fault. This is a societal, I'm not going to even say burden. This is a responsibility of society that we can, you know, I hate to call people vulnerable because they're made vulnerable. They're made legislated into poverty and kept there and with no way out. So a national disability insurance plan would just get rid of that nonsense and, qualify for it, and it's with you for life.
A third question has come in from our viewers, and it's listed as so. Someone mentioned the National Disability Insurance Program would be like EI or CPP, which have premiums deducted from people's earnings. How would premiums for a disability insurance plan be paid if a person was not in the workforce? Thoughts?
Yes. It is, in the end, it's a tax. So I think a good way that we can learn from Australia and perhaps make our system better, which I'm sure we have the ability now to make it far better because we don't have to go back and do it over again. I actually think it would be good to show up as a deduction on your paycheck so that people know exactly what they are paying for it. As it is right now, about 8%, I believe, of the money into a national disability insurance scheme in Australia comes from the states, like our provinces. So it's contributed from the states because they now do not have that extra cost of people with lifelong disabilities, which most of the time is ODSP, AISH, PWD in BC. So those with the severest cases of lifelong disabilities would fall into this program, and a separate fund is set aside for this, through taxes. So it's like a fund, like a CPP, separately managed. So it's there when you need it, and I think it's a way of income sharing where the rich pay for the poor in a sense. When you think if you don't have, you're not working, it's not going to be deducted. You're not paying for it. You're in a low income, you won't be paying income tax. So again, it's a higher income tax bracket that would be paying the Lions a bigger share of those that aren't working or those on disability.
James or Ryan, I wanted to also offer you the floor if you had any other thoughts or final remarks you'd like to share.
I would just add, it's envisioned as a universal social program. That's the ideal of it, I think, is it just like our healthcare system. It's universal. There's no barriers to access, right? So I think that's the key distinction there.
Yeah, thank you for putting that up. We have a petition at the moment to really help make this happen. Get your phones out, take a picture of that. It'll take you to the petition. It also helps describe, what we may have missed in our presentation, and we'd appreciate more signatures. I think we're at about 560 signatures. We had a petition last year, and then with the dissolution of Parliament, e-petitions get thrown out. So we started over again. And one of the groups at the university is actually working on getting petition signatures. We'd love to see 20,000 signatures, but perhaps that's a little bit much. It's sponsored and I believe supported by Peter Fragiscatos. The previous one was supported and by the Green Party. Why am I drawing a blank? The member of Parliament. He didn't get voted in. It was also at that time Bonita Zarilla was willing to also sponsor the petition. So there is a lot of political support. We just got to get that out in the open. We need politicians to stand up and be champions, and that is starting to happen. So we are very hopeful. And I think next up will be our contact information, if you have it handy. And if not, our website is simply everycanadiancounts.com. And if you need to reach me, I will be at the end of info@everycanadiancounts.com. I believe it might be in the chat.
That's fine. And I was just about to say that, Hubert, that we will be putting that information in the chat. And to our kind viewers, feel free to reach out to us at Research at Disability Without Poverty for any questions for these panelists. We would be very happy to forward this on to you. Just looking at the time right now, I again would like to express on behalf of Disability Without Poverty our sincere appreciation to all of the panelists on today's call, Hubert, James, Ryan, Professor Bonnie Hetty, and Deirdre for their valuable perspectives on this topic. To our viewers, thank you so much for tuning in, and we're going to take 10 minutes and we'll see you at the next panel. Thank you.